Starting recording, let's wait. Okay, hello everyone from Nero, from our caliphate. Today I'm a bit anxious, I'm a bit agitated because we really have a special guest because she's one of the most prominent ex-Muslim content creator of the UK scene, and maybe not only the UK scene. I have the pleasure to welcome today Nuriyah Khan. Did I pronounce correct?
Absolutely perfect.
I told you before we started to record, I'm going to butcher that English today, so be patient with me, you Nuria especially. And thank you again for joining us here in the Caliphate today, despite being maybe a little bit jet lagged still.
No problem. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, first of all. And yeah, your English is amazing, as I told you backstage, but it's an honor to be here. And yeah, I'm grateful for the work you're about to do, and it's a pleasure to be part of it. So thank you.
Okay, let me introduce what we are going to talk about today. We are basically going to talk about your story, what you went through. And I think it's very important to get to know what you went through because here in Italy, the efforts and the struggles of ex-Muslims are not really acknowledged yet because we are very few channels and we are very small. So it's not really a thing. The ex-Muslim scene, the ex-Muslim struggles is not really well known here in Italy. And your story, I think it's emblematic because it shows how a woman finding herself in a theocracy such as the country, I don't want to spoil too much now, if a woman finds herself to live to face some problem with a man in a Muslim majority country, or worse, in a theocracy, it never goes well for a woman, right? And the second point is a phrase. The phrase that I often hear when something bad or some violation of women's rights happens. Oh, but it's not religion, it's culture. No, guys, not always. It's not always the case. First of all, because how can you separate culture from religion? Because they are so much intertwined. So most of the cases, for example, the Italian case, we have the Vatican here. The influence of Vatican, of the moral set of rules, has still a big impact on our society in terms of misogyny. Even if you are not very religious, you still bear the effect of that kind of morality, of the religion of morality, of the principle that wants to see the woman as pure, perfect, virgin, immaculate. So maybe if you are not, or if you are going through, a more, let's say, atheistic or not believing system, this is horrible, I'm going to cut this anyway, you might preserve that kind of mindset, of toxic mindset. And yes, you can't completely say it's not culture is not religion, but it's culture because Islam has spread from Morocco to Indonesia, and taking woman-man relationship as an example, although Islam is certainly experienced with different nuances depending on the context and the country, there are undeniable patterns of behavior common to all these countries. And the common denominator is, in this case, Islam, which does not discourage misogynistic behavior at all. And that's all I have to say about this. It's just the first 2 points I want to make in order to introduce your story, which is huge, is a huge example of what I thought I made clear, I hope. So Nuriyah, have you been raised in a Muslim household? Were your parents strict?
Yeah, so first of all, I love the 2 points that you touch on. I think those are extremely important. And yeah, I'd love to kind of unpack that some more, I guess, as it comes up in my own story, because those are crucial to understanding what we're trying to talk about and why we're talking about it. So yeah, you summed that up beautifully with culture and religion, not being able to be separated. And in this case, in the context of misogyny and things we describe under the banner of Islam, Islam is the common denominator regardless of culture. But yeah, so sorry, just to answer your question. So I was brought up in I'd say like a moderate to conservative traditional Sunni Muslim household. So my immediate, like my parents weren't extremely strict themselves because, they were also kind of born and brought up in London. So they weren't able to kind of be that conservative and that strict in their own lives, just generally because they had to assimilate. But we lived as an extended family. I'm sure in Italy you have the same concept, maybe 2, 3 generations live together.
Yeah.
So because of that, my grandparents lived there in the house, some of my aunts and uncles as well, and some of them were quite a lot more conservative and religious. So I did always have, quite a religious atmosphere growing up around me, and I was quite close to my grandparents. So I wanted to be quite traditional, and they were quite into religion. So my grandfather, when he would go to the mosque, I would go with him all the time, and he was the imam of the mosque. So it's kind of
Oh,
like, yeah. So his reputation was, that, and then to be his granddaughter, you wanted to live up to the standards of the imam's granddaughter. So I tried very hard to actually be quite religious, more so than even my parents were. Every day after school, I would go to like classes in the mosque to read Quran, but I would take it further. So I would try and understand it in English a bit more. I would try and start memorizing the Quran. As soon as I turned 9, and my Quran teacher told us, this is when a young woman in Islam, things are taken a lot more seriously for her. I took it very seriously, and I decided to wear the hijab completely on my own choice. It wasn't forced.
you weren't pressured, so you were very committed.
I was very committed. Yeah, I thought, this is what God asks for me. He tells us in his book, and I want to go to heaven. And I was questioning my mother. I was questioning my aunts who were not wearing the veil. Like I was like, don't you want to go to heaven? But I didn't understand how they were so comfortable not wearing it, if that makes sense. So yeah, I had quite like both atmospheres at home, but I personally chose the more conservative side.
Oh, wow. So,
Yeah.
so despite your family were not so strict, your mother, your sisters, so your close relatives were not so strict. And then you kept the hijabs. How long? You kept it until you left the religion, or you?
So, no, funnily enough, and again, I would like to differentiate because, as I mentioned, there was no pressure on me, and I'll explain the reasons behind that as well, and that this is where culture and religion go hand in hand because I come from a Pakistani culture, they care a
Mhm.
lot about marriage and your prospects of marriage. And even if though it sounds counterintuitive being Muslim, sometimes some liberal Pakistani families don't want you to wear hijab because maybe your future husband doesn't want somebody who's that religious. So they want you to keep all your options open, if that makes sense. So a lot of it is dependent on what would your husband want. Does he want somebody that prays 5 times a day, or does he want somebody that's liberal? But if you can kind of grow up and then decide to wear hijab later, then that would be okay. But if you wear it when you're young and then take it off, that's seen as more of a taboo because it's like
Oh,
you were once closer to God and you were once kind of a conservative, moderate woman, and now you've decided to show your beauty and show off and not be close to God. So that was more of the reasoning, I think, why the elder generation was not pressuring me for marriage proposals and things like that. My family again thought my parents thought I was too young. But I did wear it for I was 9 years old. I wore it. I felt so proud when I was wearing it that in
no.
school, in school we had religious education, and I demonstrated how to pray in the Islamic way for my class. But then slowly, I started getting interested in sports and I wanted to play football and things like that. And they take health and safety seriously in the UK. And, it's quite a health hazard if you've got a pin here and you've got this something very tight and you're running around and you're tackling people. It is pretty dangerous. So eventually, for my own practicalities of it was stopping me playing sports, I decided it's not really worth it right now. And I decided to take it off. And I was able to freely. But the majority of experiences are not like like mine. I am the exception to the rule. Usually it's as soon as you're hitting 8, 9 years old, the pressure from, the women in your family, even if it's just slightly psychological, it is almost like expected of you. So there's a lot of duress behind closed doors. So I just want to make that clear that I do understand. I was in a very privileged position.
Yeah. But what got me, you said something that made me think that, yeah, the girl is not encouraged to wear it to spread her possibility to get to a man. But at the end of the day, you are still accommodating the needs of a man. If that one wants you to wear in that way, okay, let's do it in that way. Otherwise, you're doing the other way. So it's still this need to accommodate the man's needs first.
Absolutely.
It's disturbing to me anyway, even if it's an appearance of freedom of choice. You, at the end of the day, have to accommodate someone else, which it happens to be a man.
You said it perfect, that the illusion of choice is there, but at the end of it, it's all dependent on the needs and wants and desires and whims of a man. That's the reason they're giving you the illusion of choice. So really, it's not.
Yes, and this is, I think, the way in which what remains of the religion becomes maybe culture, but it's still something deriving from religion. And it's this misogyny we are talking about here, because maybe the religion is not anymore in place, but the misogynistic behavior are still there, and they are an inheritance from that kind of things that are encouraged from the sacred scriptures, Bible, Quran. I mean, I'm coming from the religious trauma from Christianity, so I can relate, because when you start to decide to leave that path, you feel some kind of pressure, and even when your environment gets less religious, there are still that kind of behaviors. And now, maybe in these very years, we start to see them as they are. Anyway, going back to you, and when you decided to leave it, you were not feeling afraid of the consequences in the afterlife?
Yes, no, thank you for asking that. Nobody's actually asked me that before. And yes, but like as like a 10-year-old, little girl deciding on a whim that, oh, I think football right now is more important to me. But psychologically, I had to kind of almost make a deal with my God or whatever I was doing to say, okay, do you see, like I tried and I really, really believe like in you, still in my heart. So the way I rationalized it to myself was that, okay, did me wearing this or taking it off change the way I feel or how close I feel to God in my heart? No, it didn't. So when I took it off, I told myself, in my heart, I feel even more connected to God, or at least the same level of connection. This cloth doesn't dictate that. And I thought maybe in the future, when I become, an adult, I will do my religious duty again. And like I said, the women around me weren't really doing it. So that helped a little bit, I think, with me just getting over that.
But you needed to soothe yourself to think, okay, maybe one day when I will be an adult, I will go back to wear it, in order to soothe maybe your internal struggle in some way.
Absolutely, because we have a religious duty anyway as a Muslim to go to do Hajj, the pilgrimage, once in your lifetime. And it just so happened that naturally after like a year, half a year or a year, we moved to Saudi Arabia. But my intention was always, when I go to do that pilgrimage, maybe that will be when I, reinforce everything once again.
Yeah. Should be the click in some way,
Exactly.
But I wanted to ask you something more about your hijab, because you told me that you started to wear it at 9, but I don't think I hope it's not too much intimate as a question, but you weren't hitting puberty at that time. At 9, you hit the puberty at 9?
No, you're right. I hadn't exactly. I hadn't hit puberty. I wouldn't go to hit puberty for a number of years, until I actually moved to Saudi Arabia. But again, and I hate to make this link, but this is Islam. And the reason I think the age 9 comes up is because that's when Muhammad's youngest child bride was obviously, not just married. She was married to him at 6, but he essentially had sexual intercourse with her. He raped her at 9 years old. So 9 is when, again, the way this trickles down in various communities and various Muslim sects might be different, but the mosque that I was being taught at in my part of London and the type of Sunni Islam they followed was that 9 years old is now we need to start taking things very seriously. So you need to start thinking about your prayers more. You need to now cover up. You can't even wear shorts in front of your father. Very weird things, you know? Very,
This
very
is a very
weird things.
twisted idea of mixing, of sexualizing a girl, even if you are the father. Is
Absolutely. They were told you can't wear a sleeveless top in front of your uncles, you know, uncles who have been around you since you were a newborn baby. So everything just gets weird automatically.
Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned that you then moved to Saudi Arabia. How's the life there? You got closer to the religion, then your life went on there and you got married there, right?
I ended up getting married in the UAE after like years after Saudi Arabia.
Okay, I got it wrong. Sorry.
No, no problem. But you're right. So at 9, I moved to Saudi Arabia. So my hijab had just come off. And then next thing we were moving to Saudi Arabia. So again, I thought, wow, like, look how much God is looking out for me. I decided to remove the hijab. But now it's considered very special as well, because as I said, people who try and go on this pilgrimage once in their lifetime because it's obligatory. Um, a lot of the times these Muslims have saved their entire life savings to go and do that. So for us, it was like, wow, we are getting the opportunity to move so close to the house of God that like people spend their whole lives waiting to go there. And so I was just, I was in this bubble of like, we're going to Saudi Arabia and Islam is everywhere. So I would hear the call to prayer 5 times a day. And then again, things that you're not necessarily comfortable with. Like, again, I was a young girl. I had to still wear an abaya after 1 or 2 years every time I left the compound going to school and back. So I didn't even think about my hijab anymore because I was doing a different form of hijab every single day.
Your abaya is even more covering than the hijab, right?
Exactly. And there's I am not inside our school, thankfully, it was mixed, but outside is complete gender segregation and apartheid, you know? I mean, there's men everywhere. Society is dominated by men, even to buy your own kind of undergarments, lingerie, it's just men. There's no women to be seen in society. So you felt like you were playing by the rules of Islam anyway. So I kind of toned down my inner, I guess, pride of being a Muslim because I thought I'm surrounded by Muslims. And then I was slowly starting to like wake up to other religions and people of other faiths and other nationalities and even varying different flavors, if that's a bad word to say but like flavors of Islam that people followed. Whereas in the UK, I was literally like surrounded by, just very a standard number of ethnicities and what they believed in. So Saudi Arabia was a microcosm of everything else. And then I also saw the dark sides. It's not normal to be a child and like be driving, sitting in the back of your parents' car, and you can hear people announcing, the prayer, stopping people to pray, and then you would know they would be like doing amputations and beheadings after that. And you would have religious police walking around telling like white Western women, cover up, cover up. They've got sticks in their hands, batons. So you would see this and you would think, okay, is this Islam? But again, my parents kept telling me this is a very, very like strict, perverted form of Islam. It's called Wahhabism, and this is not what we follow. So that was kind of.
Oh, sorry, I'm jaw dropping.
That's okay.
Listening to what you're saying. Okay, sorry. Go on.
Yes, so yeah, it is. Even now when I think about it, I was talking to my family the other day and I was like, guys, now that we talk about it, our life was kind of crazy, but when we were in the moment, it was just kind of normalized. So yeah, I was kind of going through the motions of all of this, but we would keep going to Mecca as well, like every few weeks. And so I felt like close to my faith in that sense because I was going to do my own personal pilgrimages. But I could see the discrimination in Saudi Arabia. There were also other Muslims in my school who were not Sunni, and Saudi Arabia is also like leans way more towards the Sunni side. So they really don't like Shia Muslims. So all of my friends that were Shias would have to be very quiet about them being Shia, and they would go to different mosques. They would kind of keep things undercover, and you would just see, how there was definitely a hierarchy, there was definitely discrimination, there was definitely human rights abuses. And then again, we're children, so I would come back from London, from holidays abroad, back to Saudi Arabia, And like if my siblings had a little teddy bear with them, they would snatch it at the airport in Jeddah and say, haram, haram, this is like a pig.
Um,
Yeah. And we're like,
children doesn't have the right to be children there.
no. Yeah, and they don't know the difference between a teddy bear, a bear, and a pig. Everything is just haram if it has a face. Because, you know, in Islam, you're not supposed to draw
Yeah.
pictures and all of this. So even for children, that somebody, you know how a child has like their favorite blanket or their favorite soft toy, and to just steal it and like throw it in the bin in front of them. This is the kind of like how much Islam seeped into your everyday life.
Speechless. Okay. And despite all this, you weren't feeling some doubts at that moment, at that time?
I felt like I said I had these question marks that I would, as a young naive child, ask my parents, and they would just quell them and quash those thoughts by saying, "Look, that's also not what we believe. This is Saudi." So that kept me calm for a while, and then you have to also remember there was no way to have my questions answered by anybody else. Like you cannot bring this up at school. You have no free access to the internet. Everything around you is controlled. It's effectively like a police state. And like we would reinforce these things at school in Islamic classes. You're just scared even more. They would show us videos of like Islamic demons and possessions. If you're having doubts, if you question, because it comes from the Quran as well, that if you're having doubts, it's basically like the devil who's trying to mislead you. And the hadith backs this up with this is the devil kind of whispering in your ear. So all of these things are very, very discouraged. And then going to Mecca every so often, just I guess as a child, made me hold on to that belief. But as I said, like I did believe inside, but something was changing. I was getting less and less hell bent on thinking this is the right path, if that makes sense, but very, very kind of minutely.
Yes, and as well, not having the chance to verify the truth of what they are telling you. Like, no, no, this is not the Islam we follow. Okay, but let's compare their behavior, their demandings on people. If they are matching the teachings on the books, on the holy books, and the Sunnah, are they similar, or they just diverge, and so they just made up this way of living Islam? Which is the real one? I think that it's a natural doubt that could raise in any girl who have lived maybe a totally other kind of life, because you were raised, you lived your first years in London, so you faced two very different models of life, of lifestyle as well.
Yeah, no,
I
and
don't
it's
know.
interesting you say that because that you raise a very good point as well. And another reason why I think I wasn't able to break out or question and everything was even less verified was even when I went to the mosque in London and I was learning about religion, it was only from what that teacher was telling me or my grandparents were telling me or what my parents thought their opinion was of something. But the entire like hadith collection that for a Sunni Muslim is so important after the Quran. It's the next thing where we get, everything that we're supposed to do kind of comes from there in some way. And that was just like in our house on the bookshelf covered with a cloth and on the highest shelf as if it's just some kind of magical thing. It's all in Arabic. You can never read it. I mean, even people who learn Arabic to understand it would barely touch it. So a young child is never gonna, open up Bukhari and Muslim and see like what's the permissibility of children to be married. Or I mean, can you imagine? I did not even know about how many wives Muhammad had. Had no idea about Aisha. So I was doing all this at 9 and wearing hijab, and just because of my teacher, her telling me that this is kind of what that Sunni Islam says from the Quran and the Hadith, this is what we get. Did I know why or where it came from or if it's based on
Yeah,
Aisha?
the stories of
Nothing.
everything.
Yeah, I was so in the dark. So when my parents would even say this is Wahhabi Islam and ours is different, I have no reference point, if that makes sense, besides like their word.
And at school, they fill you with fear, as you said. I mean, they keep you in with fear, making you scared of the consequences of some acts, and basically you don't even know why you are doing that or this or that thing, and without the possibility of even raise your hand and say why this has to be like this. It's
Exactly. Yeah.
It's the same behavior of a totalitarianism. It works in the same way: believe, fight, and that's it.
Absolutely. The MO is the same, you know, to keep you not thinking for yourselves, to keep you kind of entrapped in that.
Yeah, yeah. Believe, obey, and fight.
Yeah.
This is the fascism motto: credere, obbedire, combattere. It's exactly like a religion like this. When it's applied and it merges with a political system, theocracy is a totalitarianism. Totalitarian.
Absolutely.
Okay, I don't know if the spelling is correct, but
No, that's
okay.
perfect. Yeah, totalitarian. Yeah, it is a form of totalitarianism, and even that Islam even matches even the last element of the fight. I mean, we have the whole concept of jihad,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
we're women. We have a slightly different role, but it is still to produce little jihadis, if that makes sense, you
Yeah.
know.
Oh my God. And then you ended up married, and this is the core of the story. And yeah, what happened then?
Yeah, so fast forward like many kind of years, I had come back to the UK briefly to do university, and just to give you some context of my state of mind, I had even studied Islamic law because I wanted to go back and practice in the UAE because my parents were still living there, and I found things in that again I wouldn't say deeply misogynistic at the time because I wasn't a feminist at the time the way I am now because I didn't know what Islam stood for and what it did in that sense. So I was reading these laws and I was trying to justify them as a woman in Islam from why Allah would make this the law. So I had kind of again had certain brushes with there's a concept called halala in Islam, there's a triple divorce for men allowed, the custody of children goes to men. I had just skimmed over these things, but again, it was one course within my whole university. So I didn't dwell on it for too long. I had to pass my exams and leave. But these kind of things I'd been like, whoa, that's strange in Islam. And I never fully rationalized it to myself. But then, yeah, moving back to the UAE, I met with an old school friend from high school, and he unfortunately introduced me to one of his friends. And again, I was very young and naive at this time, but I had no idea how these things work. But there was a lot of kind of love bombing, really grand gestures, you know, this relationship that came out of kind of nowhere and then it moved really, really quickly. It was like something out of a movie. And in the moment, I had no idea that these were red flags of any kind. So I'd gone along with that. And again, our culture does not allow for, you know, spend time to get to know a man, really get to know each other, maybe travel
Yeah, to
together, maybe.
date,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. Date, see what he's like in different surroundings, you know, see how he handles different situations. It's kind of like, oh, if you are seeing a guy, then you need to make a decision because it looks bad for the community. Like, what will people say? So
Mhm.
I was very, very young, but I was pressured to get married very quickly as well because my parents were planning to leave the UAE and go and move to Malaysia. And again, in Islam, it's considered very bad if you leave your daughter unmarried as a single woman in a city by herself, where technically she could get up to anything, you know. And people, again, what will people say? So the cultural aspects and the religious aspects kind of went hand in hand in my situation here. Um, so I got married, and then like very soon after the honeymoon, I things just went really pretty bad to the point where I was losing
Just
part.
after the honeymoon,
Oh
not even
yes.
1 month. My God. Okay.
Yeah, no, not even. I mean, yeah, it was crazy how quickly it went downhill. I think a year and a half after we got married, by a year and a half I was out, and even within that year and a half, I had taken so many trips because I was like, either I felt like I needed to run away or I needed to make sense of what was happening. But each time I would come back, and then the final time when things got really bad and I started to Google, like I actually Googled like why my symptoms, like why do I feel this way? I'm a very, you know, upbeat, jolly person. Why am I watching TED Talks on like depression? I have no motivation. I'm scared. Like I always want to be in public. I don't want to be in my house. Like just very, very weird things. And then I started understanding what was happening to me when kind of checklists came up about emotional abuse, narcissistic tendencies, these kind of personality disorders, what love bombing was. And then I just traced my story to like what had happened. Um, and I
You started to
really,
see all the red flags.
oh, I saw red flags and then some. And I thought in my head, I need to keep this undercover and make everything seem normal, but I need to go because this is not going to end well. Um, and so, like it should be in any situation, if you want to leave a relationship or a marriage, you should be able to do that safely and according to your own will. So again, I was very naive, and I thought that I'd heard all my life that, oh, Muslim culture and Muslim society and Muslim laws, like the UAE technically was a safe place to live. You don't feel as scared to walk home at like 2, 3 a.m. like I would in London. It has different perks, but you were also told that Muslim women get respected so much. And so I believed that. So I thought, okay, I don't need to get anybody involved right now. I just need to leave, have a meeting with my parents and tell them what's happening. And then, I can figure it out. But I need to do that in a way that doesn't cause alarm at home, because then maybe he'll do something to me before I leave. Because the highest chance of something happening to a woman is when she's planning to leave a situation. So when I had obviously explained to my parents what was wrong, my dad intervened with my best friend, and they just said, "Get your passport and just leave that house." And I did, and that's when things started to really kind of the bubble of Dubai was starting to burst for me, because my ex-husband was not the kind who just would let this just fizzle out like this. Or
Okay.
yeah, or let me kind of take my autonomy and leave. Again, for a man, it's a thing of honor, and it brings shame and all of that, ridiculous stuff. So because you're seen as property, so it's like, oh, your property ran away from you or something like that, essentially. um so when I was trying to kind of get my life together again, get a new job, then my parents were deciding, how can we speak to his family, say we want to separate, figure this out. He had already formulated a plan to basically get a lawyer and I had never ever heard of this. I was just going to work one day, and I was back with my parents. They had moved back to Dubai just to be with me. And I get a call from Dubai police stating some Arabic law that I've never heard of. It's called Ta'a Zawjiyya,
Mhm.
and it is Sharia. It's a Sharia law. I had no idea then, but I asked him, what does this mean? And he said, it means the disobedience of the wife. You have been disobedient to your husband, so you must return to the marital home. If you don't do that within like 48 hours, we will come and arrest you and take you back there, and you cannot leave again without his permission.
Okay. So you were under arrest for leaving an abusive marriage. That's amazing. I mean, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, the very
And
people you think would protect you, you first think maybe go to the police station or something. No, they're the ones calling you saying, we're gonna arrest you and kidnap you.
for what crime? For being nushuz, for committing nushuz toward your husband,
You
committing
know it. Yes.
disobedience. For the audience, it means disobedience, and it's told about in the fourth surah. If you fear disobedience from your wife, you first have to um, talk to her, then abandon her in her bed, and then as the last resort, you can beat her. As they say lately, gently, but is in the
Absolutely.
hand of the man. How can you know how his his meaning of gently? Maybe gently for him, he's Mike Tyson. He has the strength of a boxer. So you don't know how you end up with
Yeah.
this.
And gently is pathetic. I don't care if they say do it with a feather and, stroke her or beat her with kisses. It's pathetic.
Yes, absolutely, because it's in any way you want to put it as you like, but
Yeah.
it shows a big impairment between man and woman. Because come on, first of all, is there put a surah, an ayah that says, okay, if you fear disobedience from your husband, there's nothing like that.
Exactly.
And how a God should instruct a man how to discipline his wife? You have to deal with another adult, and let's hope a consenting adult. So why you have to instruct a man how to deal with the marital problems? Come on, do you need a God to tell you this?
Yeah.
And do you need a God telling you, yes, if she behaves bad, if she's a naughty wife, you can beat her, but just like this, bad girl, bad girl. Come on, it's so silly. This thing is so silly. It just reflects the era when this was written down when these things were not problematic at all. That's it.
Exactly. And like you said, no matter what you say, even this, as you said, lately, they're adding the word gently or lightly in brackets. This wasn't even a problem maybe like 30 years ago because they didn't care to say gently or lightly. This is just now because, it's very embarrassing for them. But it, as you said, it reflects that mindset back then, and it clearly shows that it's a one-way street. First of all, like you said, why do you need a god to tell you how to deal with this? The Quran even talks about not to stay too long at Muhammad's house. Like this is the kind of
Yeah.
level your petty god is telling you about. But the fact
Yeah.
that he has to come and get involved, and the fact that it's a god who even is advocating violence, like that's just,
Yeah.
to me, that makes no sense. Even when I for a split second would contemplate God, and I would think about the Islamic God. So I would read others like Eastern philosophy that would say divinity is not violence, and I would always apply that to Islam. And maybe that's why growing up slowly I didn't take Allah that seriously anymore, because I thought he's a violent thug. But like you also said, the impairment, because it's completely one-sided, and then you've got the one-sided unilateral rights that only men get. The same thing with how many women they can marry, the same thing with that they don't need to marry Muslim women. Everything leans towards men. But as you said, just the reflection of daraba, the beating of women, it actually is so dark and dirty and twisted that they describe it in their tafsirs and things like that, when even they're discussing nushuz, as you said, which is what the law was put on me, kind of all relates back to as nushuz and how to discipline them. It is actually talked about and discussed the same way they would use the bark called the miswak thing they use to
Okay.
clean their teeth, the way they would discipline their chattel and their camels and their donkeys. It's women are just a separate category on how do you use the same kind of tool and rod to discipline them as you would to your domesticated
Cattle, yeah.
animals. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my God. And then what happened after the visit of this police?
Oh, I ran back to my parents. I was like shocked by what I was hearing, and naturally they were as shocked as me because they had also grown up in the West, and they thought there is no way we are letting our daughter be sent back to that man, and there's let alone a judge being able to do that. Well, how can that happen? And then, I was trying to give them a wake up call, and I was like, our concept of UK laws or whatever, British human rights or whatever, doesn't apply here. Here, Sharia does still take reign. As you said, it is a theocracy. At the end of the day, we can't forget that. If Sharia is a dominant force in the law, then to some degree it is a theocracy, no matter if they have, various laws for expats and other things. The personal law for Muslims is Sharia. It has to be. You have no choice. So when
Mhm.
they understood that, then we had to take things very seriously. The only way I could resist them arresting me forcibly and taking me back to him was to initiate a divorce like immediately through the court. And as you know, again, people say, my story doesn't make sense because in Islam, you have the right to get a divorce as a woman. No, according to the Quran, only a man has the right to divorce you. What Muslim countries have done is they have added a process called khulla, like Pakistan has done this, Tunisia, Egypt, all of them, Morocco, where the UAE, where you can ask for a divorce through the courts. You're not guaranteed to get it, number one. It's getting easier now in the UAE since my stories happened, but you're not guaranteed to get it. And you have to have a very, very good reason. And their threshold
Yeah,
is very different from, a normal
exactly.
threshold.
A man can just say, okay, talak, 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 it's okay, go. For woman is way more difficult. So the
Exactly.
impairment is still there. I
Yeah.
mean, okay,
And
they
not
added
just that.
laws, but it's still there.
Yeah, they added a route, but it's still, you have to jump through hoops, and it's such an obstacle to even get that. And they discourage you at every state. So even if you do pursue a khullah, they ask you to forgo your Islamic rights. So they're already like, what is a woman in, you're not guaranteed half of a property like you are in under most Western secular laws, right? So a woman, especially if you've got children, you're gonna end up most of the time staying because it's every part of the system is working against you, right? How are you going to fend for your children if you can't work without a man's permission? You have no authority to leave the house, then you've got no money coming in. It's, you're set up to fail.
And you don't have the right of the maintenance, I guess, right?
So,
When you
oh my
divorce.
gosh, this is the most like twisted thing. So, according to Islam, you're supposed to have the right to maintenance monthly, which is called nafaka. In the UAE, they use the word nafaka for it. Again, this is used and weaponized in the most petty way. So, for example, in my case, because from the day that I left, every
Mhm.
single day from then Islamically, technically, from the day you've left your husband's house, you should be entitled to nafaka from that day that he has not been
Okay.
keeping you. But again, if you ask for a khulla, that amount can be seriously minimized because they take it as you voluntarily left. So technically, if you were in the house, he would still be paying for you. And then the it was such a joke to me because I actually tried to stay and go through the process in the UAE. I wanted to see the divorce on the paper, but the judge actually put down nafaka payments to how much would like monthly lipstick cost and how much would this cost. And this is in the judgment for the divorce. Like this is how much you're entitled to for monthly makeup allowance. That was the nafaka in my case. I actually have the divorce.
That's
So
really ridiculous. The lipstick cost, come on.
and you know, when you've declared things like I had declared, obviously, I was being stalked for a number of months. I was being harassed. My privacy was invaded. Like people were watching my window in my villa. I had moved property many times to kind of keep my address hidden. Then I was being followed at my place of work. I was being sent unwanted gifts to my like disrupting my kind of, you know, my day at work, making it super embarrassing. All of these things were happening. There was like, you know, some Muslims believe in black magic. There was like black magic thrown outside my door. And I had cameras installed to show the police this is what I wake up to when I leave my house for work. And none of that is on the judgment except for lipstick allowance and a
You were
divorce.
not you were basically not the victim here. There
Yeah.
was much more than victim blaming here. You were everything was the other way around. He was the victim of being deprived of his property, and
Uh,
you were the felon here for
oh
leaving
yeah.
without his consent.
I was the runaway chattel. Yeah.
My God,
Yeah.
really absurd, shocking. Okay, and how did you escaped, I guess, in this case, because how did this nightmare ended?
So so when I talk about stalking and harassment, there was one level being from, you know, my ex-husband and people that he might have hired separately, but a second level of that was happening
He
on
had
like
people.
yeah, because I would travel as well. I'd come back to the UK and people would tell me that even when I was away, random people would be walking up and down trying to look into my windows. And then as soon as I was back, they would know the second I was back in the country. So again, I didn't have the police to go and report these things to because they literally would not take it seriously. And I had spent hours in the police station by this point and very, very like respectfully, you know, I knew I'm a Muslim woman, I'm in a Muslim country. I would actually go, even though it's not required, I would go to the police station in an abaya with my scarf. You know, I had some tattoos by then. I would hide them. It was very respectful. And they themselves are inherently misogynistic. So these policemen would try and be flirting with me, ask me highly inappropriate questions about what I'm going to do after I get a divorce, if I get it, why I want it, all of these things. So after like hours of and days of just being called back to the station, them calling me at inappropriate times. You're not supposed to call a woman after 10 p.m. to ask her to come to a Dubai police station. They would ask me to come on weekdays, on weekends. And then once they turned up at my house, four policemen with their car, like the big car to kind of take me to the station. And I know that they bought four men for a reason, right? They're trying to put any charge on me now that's just going to really make me crack, or in a way that would force me to hand over my passport, like a crime so big that you have to give your passport over. So thankfully, I knew a little bit by this time of all my years living in that country that there's, you know, when I told you earlier, I knew that I thought Muslim women were protected there or they respect them. So I knew at least one thing is there's no Muslim women here, and it's haram technically for me to get into a car with four strange men, and it's
Of course.
beyond 10 p.m. So thankfully my brain worked in that moment to use their own law against them. And I said, my father isn't home. He's in the United Kingdom and he is my mahram. My mahram is like my guardian because I've left my husband's house. So I've transferred myself as the property from my husband to my father. Now, my main property caretaker isn't here. So I can't get in the car with 4 strange men until you bring a woman officer. And
This
they
is a
could,
smart move. I mean, you use the rules. Okay, he is my mahram now, so I can't move. Great.
yeah, I had to use their laws against them. Just that, I think this was one of the moments that saved my life. This and essentially what I did next. But yeah, because there's also a rule in Dubai where they're not really allowed to step into your villa. Unless they have like a warrant from a judge or something. So even then, like at the gates, I said, well, my father's not here and I can't leave my house. So those kind of two things help them be a bit like, okay, not today, we'll come and get you tomorrow. So yeah, after they realized that, they had to find another time, date, and place to come and get me, I was very much done at this point, and I thought this is not going to end. So I had resigned myself to handing over my passport, which is what they kept hounding me for, which they kept trying to get me to the police station to do. So in the first few instances, I didn't take it with me. But again, living in the UAE now, I'm not completely naive to everything that happens there. I'd go back to the UK and I would hear horror stories of, Brits getting into trouble in Dubai and them having their passports taken away and then them being stuck in the country. So I knew that they can get you on very, very little things. And if they take your passport, you're at their mercy. So my
Mm.
final hand to play was, my passport in my possession. But by this point, this was months and months of this going on. And I was like, you know what, just take it. So
Oh.
I went outside the police station and my lawyer was actually there just to see what was happening. And I thought, what's the last thing I can do? Like, just the last thing before I give this to them, just in case my embassy or anyone just knows that, like, once I go in there, whatever they charge me with, whatever they make me sign, at least somebody knows that I went there, you know?
Mm.
So I quickly just Googled on my phone, like the number for British expatriates living in the UAE, the emergency number. And this man answered, and I like was in like a state of, this hyper, what's going to happen? So in 30 seconds, I just kind of told him what was happening, what they had been doing to me, what they're trying to take now, where they're calling me. And he just obviously said, I can't give you legal advice, but the most important thing is, do you have your passport in your hand still, or have you given it? And I said, no, I'm in the car outside. It's with me. And he just said, look, please do not go inside. Like, do not
Okay.
go inside. He said, if you can right now, just drive to the airport. I know it sounds crazy, but just come home because these laws don't apply like at home. Over there, we can't under their Sharia and under their allegations, we can't do anything because this is their jurisdiction. Just come home. And he said, like, your divorce, whatever, just doesn't matter. Just get back. At the same time, my lawyer came running out and she also said, because she kept encouraging me to stay here and fight for the divorce, just quite like female empowerment. We were trying to say, let's go
Yeah.
through the process, let's win this. And when I saw her face as well, and she said, Nuriyah, just go. They are not going to leave you. They're going to make your life hell. They're going to put a travel ban on you if you don't give your passport. And thankfully, I called one of my friends. I booked the first flight out, and it was within hours that they were going to put a travel ban on me. Yeah.
You just escaped like in an action movie.
Oh
Amazing.
yes, and like every second of that airport thing, like every time you scan your passport or your residency card, every beep, my heart was like, has it alerted the police? Has something happened? Even at the airport, they were calling me like, when are you coming? When are you coming? And the call to prayer was going on. I didn't want them to hear like a flight announcement because then they would know I'm leaving. So I answered one of their calls while the call to prayer was happening, and I just said, I'm in the mall, I'm coming. And they said, okay. And literally after that, I boarded the flight. And even up to that point, I was boarding the flight. My name beeped, like the boarding pass when it was being scanned, it beeped for me. And I thought, that is it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm stuck in this country forever. And then it turned out that they said, I'm going to move you to the front of the plane. And I said, okay, that's it. Khalas, they're going to move me to the front of the plane because it's easier to arrest someone without making a scene. You just take them off the plane and handcuff them and whatever. Um, and again, my mother is freaking out because she just wanted to know that my plane had left
Yeah.
UAE airspace. That's it. Like, if you're off the runway, you're a little bit safer. So it was very touch and go with what was happening. But thank goodness, I don't know how. The only reason my passport beeped at the boarding thingy was because I had booked the flight so last minute. Like, nobody books a flight that last minute that they upgraded me. So yeah, and that was it. I flew to Baku and then on to London, and I never looked back.
Oh, yeah, I can believe. But at that point, were you still Muslim?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I was going through this, I was trying to understand what was happening, and I kept saying, these are men. Again, this is a problem with all these men. They're abusing their positions of power, they're abusing their authority, they're misogynistic, they're this, they're that. But Allah's perfect. Islam is okay still. Even the Sharia law that was put on me, the clause of for nushuz and da'a zawjiyya, I thought they had taken something maybe that was there, but they had completely, like I thought about Islam in Saudi Arabia, it was them messing it up. I always thought
Yeah.
they're the problem, not the text or the religion itself. So I still held that mentality, believe it or not, until I came back to London.
And then what happened to
And
London?
then everything I started to try and just process. Why did this happen to me? How can this happen to me? What did they try and put on me? Where does this come from? So I had some time to, like process my thoughts. I started writing. And then I thought I need to stop acting like this is either just men, or I need to realize how I can still believe in this religion and defend it. Because in the UK, people are obviously going to say Sharia is bad. That was my thing anyway. A lot of the times people do think that. And I would have to say, yeah, this happened to me in a Sharia country, but surely it's not Sharia related. It's them. So I actually, believe it or not, went to try and defend the Quran or God still, and try and explain my story away somehow. But at least from my little course at university on Islamic law, I knew that if you say something is Sharia, it must have its roots in the Quran. It must. So
Mhm.
instead of, for the first time in my life, having read the Quran in Arabic all those times, when not knowing anything really that it meant, I thought, let me just go on Quran.com and read it in English. Like, if Taha Zawjiyya, I read articles and articles on nushuz, the meaning, on Taha Zawjiyya, on ijma, on what a wife's disobedience means, on the disciplinary methods. And then I thought, I can't do this anymore because they're all quoting, as you rightly said as well. They quote Quran, so they quote 434, they quote all these things. So you have to go back to that. And for the first time, like the things I'd learned at university through just, thinking with a bit more of a critical mind from a legal perspective, I analyzed the Quran from what I was seeing in that sense without being like, oh, this is so beautiful from Allah. I was actually like, what the hell does this say? Like, how do you get from that to I can kidnap you, I can arrest you and take you back there and you can't leave? How do I get from a beautiful Allah to that? And I saw it in front of my face, like complete. I thought as a lawyer, I could do this and plenty more with what's written in the Quran. It's easy. I can oppress women, I can abuse women, I can sexually violate women. You could do whatever you want. It's
Yes,
all there.
because
No,
sorry,
no,
go on.
no, go for
No,
it.
I was thinking in this very moment. I mean, it's like in the eyes of a lawyer, I guess, Quran might be considered as a sort of constitution that gives you the principles. Then you go on to build the laws in specific that goes in specific. So this could be the case. I mean, they
Absolutely.
inspire some ideas, and then men go and make them more precise, more detailed. But the
And if
principles are there.
And if, yeah, the principles are there, and if the building blocks are that bad and that vague, and as you said, that kind of the power dynamic is shifted towards one gender specifically, it's a recipe for disaster. It is opening it up
Yeah.
to all kinds of abuses, right?
Yes, yes. And then what was the last drop that made you leave for once and forever?
So the very again, just because this is something you're brainwashed with as a child, you're indoctrinated, and I never thought I could leave a religion in that sense. I think I'd met one person in their life that had told me at university he used to be Muslim and he wasn't anymore. He was studying Islamic law, that module with me, and I remember looking at him thinking, "You're crazy! Like, who leaves Islam? How dare you? Like, what is wrong with you? And even if you leave it, it's never really left you." So I didn't think there was a life without Islam. But after going through this and then seeing what the Quran said, and then thinking the only way this can be now saved for me is if somehow in Muhammad's teachings or the sayings of Muhammad, i.e. for me, the Sunnah, in any of that, if he says things which it's stupid anyway, because he can't override the Quran, he can't override Allah, even though technically I think they're the same, one and the same, but he he can't do that because it's problematic. But I wanted to hold on to my faith so badly that I went to the Sunnah to try and see, how did this perfect man live and what did he say about women? Surely he must put in, as you said, he must build on that and put in mechanisms to protect us, right? And to make it so that that could never happen, that taha zawjiyya. And as I'm sure you're aware, from me being that little girl who was in mosque learning about Islam to now being an adult and reading what was in the sources, finding out Muhammad's personal life, finding out the way, he viewed women, finding out about Aisha, finding out that she was a child. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I would never look at this thing the same. And it was within a moment, I was just disgusted and I thought, nope, I've been lied to. This is man-made. This is a cult that has gotten out of hand. Generation, and you just think you're in the Truman Show or something, like that movie where it was one of those moments. But yeah, once I saw and read what I did in English and I realized why they would only teach us in Arabic, it made a lot of sense.
But I wanted to ask you, but now, how do you feel when women defends Islam and they push this narrative like, under Islam we are like queens, we are absolutely not forced to wear hijab. Don't you think it's a narrative that can be used only for converts or for Muslims in the West? Because how can you talk like this, talk about the condition of women when they live in a Muslim majority country? This impairment is there to see. I mean, you can't speak for everyone. Maybe if you live in Europe and you have rights that are given because you live in a secular country, okay, you can say, oh yeah, my religion is beautiful, it gives me rights and is very well designed for give the woman a beautiful life, full of beautiful things. We are treated as princes, as queens. How do you react now when you hear such things?
Oh, I can't. I honestly, I can't stand it. It's a sad reality because I feel like, you're invalidating, or you're just not even accepting the harsh reality, which is, as I said, like even my story kind of alludes to the little bit of privilege you have in the West, that if I do take it off and I report to the authorities that there's being undue influence on me to wear this, there is some protection mechanisms for me. Maybe that's why my parents were very chill either way, as well. But that's not the case for even, by the way, in Western countries, but with the very, very strict conservative households, they pretty much are experiencing the same thing that potentially a Muslim woman in a Muslim country does. Just she has the added protections, but it doesn't mean she would use them, because you're again, the manipulation is so strong, and the repercussions, or the fear of the repercussions, is so strong. But yeah, it hurts me to see that where the real kind of cries for feminism need to be heard. Like when you look at what the Iranian women are saying and doing, and these White Wednesday protests, and when they're having the audacity to pull their veil down in front of these regime members who are willing to kill you for showing 2 strands of hair. It just seems like you have a very, very warped sense of freedom and choice, and you're silencing all these women who are telling you these are our real experiences, our real lived experiences under Sharia in an Islamic country, which you are kind of joining into, like a hug immensely, by saying our version in the West doesn't do that to us, therefore that version doesn't really exist.
Yeah, it's a horrible way to invalidate the experience of people
Absolutely.
who are living under uh, a set of laws that are directly inspired by the Sunnah and the Quran. So yeah, I think it's very, in some way, selfish
Yeah.
to say the least. I think it's more than 1 hour. I think I stole your time even too much for today. And I don't know if you want to add something. I just can invite my small audience to subscribe to your channel because it's worthy. And thank you again for being here. I don't know if you want to add something for us.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And yeah, time flew while I was talking to you. I absolutely love this discussion, even though I get so, I feel like I sound like a broken tape recorder when I tell my story over and over again. But as you said, like these conversations, if they're being had in like different parts of the world now in different languages, and people are getting exposed to these things, then the more we can connect and spread this same message that there's a problem here and we need to talk about it, and we are not gonna just fall for the trap of labeling it as culture, or it's what these people do over there and that's not an Islam problem. No, we can take it right back to the source. And I'm so glad that you see that as well, and like it's so evident that you know what you're talking about. We're not making up these things out of nowhere, nushuz and tahazawjiya and daraba. This is all there. So yeah, I just want to say, obviously, I will be sharing this everywhere, and I'll encourage all of my viewers as well to come and subscribe to your channel and to spread the word amongst the Italian speaking audience as well. So, and I'd love to have you on my channel just for a general discussion as well, maybe unpacking these concepts some more and how much your understanding is and how we see that from a feminist perspective.
Yeah, it's a pleasure for me whenever you want. Thank
Oh,
you.
amazing. No, thank you so much. And yeah, in the words of our apostate prophet, stay away from Islam. And
Yeah.
I hope to speak to you again soon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. See you soon. Nero.
Ciao.